Undercover boss orders. A service at his daycare, shocked when he hears staff yelling at a single mom. What happens when a CEO walks into his own daycare center and uncovers the truth buried beneath tired smiles and children's laughter? Elliot Mendez, the founder of SunnySteps, a growing chain of 15 childcare centers, had built his name on one promise: a safe, nurturing place where every child and caregiver matters. For over a decade, he believed he had succeeded. But lately, something had shifted. Complaints had started to pile up. Toddlers left crying too long, unexplained bruises, stressed-out staff snapping at parents. And yet, every report from his regional managers painted a perfect picture. Numbers were steady. Retention looked fine. "All good, boss," they'd say. Still, something didn't feel right. Then came the whisper, a message from an anonymous staff member at the Cedar Hill branch. "We're breaking, and no one's listening." So Elliot made a decision. He shaved off the clean corporate look, put on faded khakis, grabbed an old backpack, and walked into Cedar Hill as Ben, a quiet man starting training for an entry-level caregiver role. He thought he was going to check on protocols and morale. He had no idea he was about to meet a woman pushed to the edge, a system on the verge of collapse, and a truth that would shake the very foundation of everything he thought he had built. The first thing that hit Elliot when he stepped into the Cedar Hill Daycare Center wasn't the smell of baby powder or warm milk. It was fatigue, not his own, but soaked into the walls, the floors, the air itself. It clung to the tired footsteps of the caregivers, in the slow blink of a toddler struggling to nap, in the crackle of an intercom that hadn't been replaced in over a decade. He adjusted his hoodie, shifted his backpack higher on his shoulder, and gave his name, Ben, the new volunteer, at the front desk. Nobody looked twice at him. Nobody asked for ID. The receptionist just pointed down the hall and told him to stick close to Rosa. And just like that, he was in. Rosa. She was the first real face Elliot saw behind the scenes. Mid-50s, short, with silver streaks in her bun and a name tag hanging off center. Her uniform was clean but faded, her sneakers worn to the heel. She was crouched near a playpen, gently rubbing a toddler's back while bouncing a fussy baby on her hip. One look and Elliot knew this woman had been holding the center together far longer than anyone had probably noticed. He introduced himself with a soft, "Hi, I'm Ben, new here." And she managed a polite smile. "Welcome to the circus," she said, voice dry but not unkind. She motioned for him to follow her into the lion's den. There were 8 children under her care in that room alone. 8. 2 still in diapers, 3 just starting to walk, and the rest in that dangerous age where they run before they think. Rosa moved through them like water through stones, changing a diaper with one hand while spoon-feeding another, her eyes constantly scanning, anticipating cries before they came. Elliot did his best to keep up, grabbing wipes, tidying blocks, and holding open the trash bin. Still, she was doing the work of 3 people. No breaks, no complaints. 5 minutes in, Elliot started writing in his head. 5 hours in, he stopped. Nothing he could put down would fully capture the ache in her joints, the patience behind her hushes, the way she flinched when the walkie crackled with Brent's voice. Brent was the shift supervisor, early 40s, an expensive haircut, always standing just a little too straight. He barked into the radio like he was running a military base, not a daycare. When he entered the room, everything tightened, Rosa included. "Rosa!" he called, not even waiting to step inside. "Why are the Smith twins still in the nap room? Their mom's early." "They just fell asleep," Rosa replied, still holding a child on her shoulder. "I was going to wake them in 10. Brent stepped in, glanced around like he was auditing her soul. "This isn't a retirement home. Get moving. You know how their mom gets." He turned and left before she could respond. Elliot watched her press her lips together. Then, wordlessly, She shifted the baby off her shoulder and moved to wake the twins. That was the moment something broke in him, not with anger, not yet, but with that silent, heavy kind of sorrow, the kind you only feel when you witness quiet dignity being trampled by someone who doesn't know what it's worth. The afternoon wore on. Elliot saw Rosa handle an accident, clean up a spill, and calm a child having a meltdown, all without raising her voice. She didn't stop once to drink water. It wasn't until the last toddler was picked up around 5:45 p.m. that she sank into the plastic kiddie chair by the cubbies and exhaled like she hadn't breathed in 10 hours. He sat across from her, careful not to break the silence too quickly. Outside, parents honked from the pickup lane. Inside, the building hummed low with the sound of exhaustion. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She gave a tired chuckle. "Define okay." He smiled faintly but said nothing. "My back hurts. My fingers are swollen. I forgot to eat lunch, but nobody got hurt, nobody cried too long, so yeah, I guess I'm okay." Elliot wanted to say something, wanted to reach into his wallet, pull out the CEO card, and tell her this whole place would change tomorrow. But that wasn't the point of being undercover. Not yet. He was here to see, to feel, to understand. And what he was beginning to understand was that the soul of this place didn't live in any policy binder. It lived in Rosa, and no one was protecting her. As she rose slowly from the chair, preparing to clean up the art room before closing, Brent's voice came through the intercom again, sharp as ever. "Rosa, make sure the infant mats are sanitized. We had a drop-in parent complain about a smell." She didn't flinch this time, but she didn't answer either. Elliot followed behind her as she disappeared into the back hallway. He could see her reflection in the window, stoic, still upright, but smaller somehow, as if each day here had carved away pieces of her until only the essential remained. And still, she stayed. That night, Elliot drove home in silence, gripping the wheel a little tighter than usual. His disguise might have fooled them, but the truth he saw in Rosa's eyes didn't need a second day to reveal itself. But he would return tomorrow anyway, because she deserved more than just sympathy. The next day, Elliot walked into the daycare earlier than scheduled. The fluorescent lights hadn't fully warmed up yet. The hallways were quiet, except for the low hum of a vacuum cleaner somewhere down the corridor. Rosa was already there. Again. She stood at the sink in the infant room, washing plastic toys in silence, her sleeves rolled up, wrists red from the water. No one else had arrived. No one saw her. But she was already working. Elliot leaned against the door frame, unseen, and watched her for a moment. She wasn't just early. She was unpaid early. He made a note. By 8 a.m., the chaos had returned. Children flooded in, toddlers in different stages of meltdown, parents in a rush, blankets misplaced, bottles forgotten, diaper bags mislabeled. And through it all, Rosa remained a pillar. Quiet, present, almost invisible. Then came the whispers. A mother standing by the check-in kiosk turned to another parent and said under her breath, "My kid came home yesterday with a red mark on her wrist. Said the teacher tied it too tight." Another parent replied, "Mine said they didn't get their afternoon snack." Again. Elliot's ears sharpened. He watched Brent walk by, smiling politely at the parents but shooting daggers at the staff once their backs were turned. Minutes later, he called Rosa out into the hallway. Elliot followed behind, pretending to wipe down a table. Brent didn't lower his voice. "We've had 2 parent complaints in the last week about incidents in your room. I don't know what's going on, but this can't continue." Rosa stiffened. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm with the kids all day, alone most of the time. I try my best." "Trying isn't enough." Brent crossed his arms. "Do you want to be responsible if something worse happens? If a child gets hurt again?" Elliot's stomach twisted. There it was. Guilt by exhaustion. Blame by default. Later that morning, one of the younger staff members, a girl named Lanny, barely 20, quietly pulled Elliot aside. "She takes the blame for everything," she whispered. "Honestly, Rosa's the only reason this place hasn't collapsed. She covers for everyone. When people don't show up, she takes double shifts. She hasn't had a proper break in weeks." Elliot nodded slowly, his heart already heavy with what he was hearing. "Why doesn't she say something?" Lonnie shrugged. "Single mom, her son's been sick. She can't afford to lose this job. Brent knows that." Elliot turned his eyes toward the security camera above the hallway. It wasn't just mismanagement. It was coercion. He spent the rest of the afternoon in near silence, watching as Rosa moved between rooms without stopping. From diaper duty to circle time, from preparing bottles to cleaning spills, no one else noticed. Her shoes squeaked softly on the linoleum, but she made no sound of her own. At one point, a baby threw up on her shoulder mid-burping. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask for help. She just carried the baby to the bathroom and rinsed her blouse under cold water, then came right back out like nothing happened. Elliot wasn't a stranger to overwork. He'd built SunnySteps from scratch. He knew sweat, long hours, and sacrifice. But this was something else. This was quiet suffering, disguised as duty. When the afternoon sunlight cut through the blinds, painting pale yellow lines across the playroom floor, Elliot saw Rosa sway slightly as she stood up. Not a big movement, barely there, but her hand reached out for the shelf to steady herself. Fatigue, dehydration, probably low blood sugar. He wanted to step in. He wanted to speak, but he waited. Not yet. Not until the picture was fully clear. As pickup time rolled around and the center began to empty, Elliot took a seat near the main hallway, pretending to help log cleaning checklists, while Brent stood near the front, chatting up a new parent with his usual rehearsed charm. Just then, the Smith toddler, barefoot, still sleepy from nap time, wandered out of the playroom unattended. Elliot stood up instinctively. Rosa spotted it too. In 3 steps, she reached the child before anyone else could blink. She scooped him up, hugged him gently, then whispered something calming into his ear. No drama, no panic, just instinct. Brent turned, saw the scene, and instead of thanking her, barked, "Why wasn't the gate latched?" "That's in your room, Rosa." Her face froze. She looked at the child, then at Elliot, then lowered her eyes. Elliot gritted his teeth. That was it. He reached into his pocket and clicked open the Notes app. He didn't even need to type. The story was already written. That night, Elliot sat in his parked car for a long time, staring out the windshield. He thought about the way Rosa held that baby. The way Lonnie whispered like truth was something dangerous. The way Brent smiled with his mouth but punished with his power. The way silence had become the currency of survival. The next morning, Elliot arrived earlier than usual. The daycare was still locked. He stood outside in the gray dawn, sipping cheap gas station coffee, watching the sunrise smear across the windows like hope stretching over exhaustion. He wasn't here to pretend anymore. He needed to understand. When the lights flicked on and the first click of the front door echoed down the hall, he stepped inside. Rosa was there again. Of course she was. Already in uniform, already unpacking a bin of clean blankets, already folding them neatly, as if the world hadn't worn her down to the bone. Elliot waited until she was alone in the nap room, kneeling beside a crib, replacing a fitted sheet with practiced hands. He approached quietly and crouched near her, speaking in a gentle, even tone. "Hey, Rosa, got a second?" She looked up, startled. "Oh, hi, Ben, you're early. I wanted to ask something, off the record." Rosa hesitated, then nodded. She sat back on her heels, wiping a stray curl from her damp forehead. "You're always here before everyone," Elliot said. "And you're always the last to leave." She gave a small smile, tired and tight-lipped. "Well, someone has to. Why you?" That question hovered in the air. She didn't answer right away. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. "I used to be a nurse," she said finally. "Pediatrics. For almost 20 years," Elliot blinked. "I didn't know that." "Most people here don't," she said, eyes focused on a stuffed elephant beside her. "I had to quit when my son got sick. He needed around-the-clock care. My license lapsed. No hospital would touch me after that." A beat passed. "I needed work. Someone told me SunnySteps was hiring, flexible hours. Like family," they said. Her voice caught a little on those two words. Like family. "What happened after that?" Elliot asked. "I started as part-time, but then they offered full days if I filled in for sick calls. And then Brent started scheduling me doubles, saying he couldn't find coverage. And then one day, the shift board just had my name on both morning and afternoon." She gave a small shrug. "And now it's just expected." Elliot's stomach turned. "No extra pay?" Rosa laughed once, hollow and brief. "Sometimes I get a pat on the back." She looked down at her palms, lined, dry, with a faint red patch from bleach or baby wipes or both. He let the silence breathe before asking, "Have you ever thought about pushing back?" "I did." Once she paused, choosing her words like they might cost her. "Brent told me he could easily replace me with 2 younger girls fresh out of high school. Said if I didn't want the shifts, someone else would. I need this job, Ben. My son's medications alone." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Elliot felt something sink inside him, deeper than guilt, heavier than anger. This wasn't burnout. This was survival. "You deserve better," he said softly. Rosa chuckled again, dryly. "We all do, but I'm too tired to hope." Elliot leaned forward, looked her straight in the eyes. "Rosa, what if someone is paying attention? What if someone can change things?" She smiled politely, the way people smile at fairy tales they've long stopped believing in. "Then I hope they hurry," she said. Just then, Lonnie walked into the room. She paused when she saw them, then gave Rosa a look Elliot couldn't quite read. Part worry, part respect. "Ms. Rosa," she said gently, "there's a mom at the front asking for you." Rosa stood slowly, her knees cracking slightly. "Back to it," she said with a thin smile. As she left, Elliot caught Lonnie's eye. "You look out for her, don't you?" Lonnie's face hardened slightly. "She saved me on my second day. I nearly dropped a baby during diaper change. She caught him before he hit the floor. Never told a soul." Elliot nodded. "She deserves more." "She deserves rest," Lonnie said, "but nobody gives that to women like her." And with that, she turned and walked away. Elliot stood there, alone in the nap room, surrounded by cribs and quiet. The sun was higher now, lighting the mobile above him in slow circles. He'd come here looking for surface-level problems, staffing gaps, protocol violations, maybe a toxic manager or two. But what he'd found was deeper. A woman held together by dignity and desperation. A system that mistook sacrifice for disposability. A silence that stretched so far, it had become normal. Elliot knew what he had to do next, and it wouldn't be quiet. Not anymore. Lunch hour at the Cedar Hill Daycare was always a little chaotic. Kids laughing, crying, climbing, falling. Snack trays are clattering, plastic toys rolling under tables. But today, Elliot felt something simmering beneath the surface. It started when he noticed a small boy, Noah, tumble onto the floor near the reading corner. A minor fall, barely a scratch, but his wail rang out sharp. Rosa, who had been helping another child tie a shoelace, rushed over. She scooped Noah into her arms gently, murmuring soft words, checking him carefully for bruises. The boy calmed down within seconds. She set him down with a soft kiss on the forehead and went back to work. But one of the parents, already at the front for early pickup, had witnessed the fall, and she didn't like what she saw. "That's unacceptable," the woman snapped. "Where were you?" "My son could have cracked his skull." Rosa blinked, flustered. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. He tripped over a toy. I was helping another—" "Excuses," the mother cut in, voice rising. "You people always have excuses. How many kids are you even watching by yourself?" Others began turning toward the noise. A few staff froze. Some of the children stared wide-eyed. Before Rosa could respond, Brent emerged from the back, and he was already fuming. "Rosa!" he barked. "What happened now?" Elliot watched the color drain from Rosa's face. Her shoulders straightened, but her eyes dimmed. "The boy tripped," she said calmly, voice low. "It was an accident. He's okay." "That's not what I heard," Brent cut her off. "This is the third complaint this week. I'm tired of cleaning up after your mistakes." He turned toward the mother. "I'll write her up immediately. Please know we take this very seriously." Rosa opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Elliot felt his pulse thudding in his ears. Then Brent said it. "Maybe it's time we reconsidered your role here, Rosa. You're not as fast as the others, and clearly not attentive enough." The room fell silent. Children murmured, parents exchanged glances. Lonnie froze mid-step, a bottle of milk still in her hand. Rosa stood completely still, her lips trembling just slightly. That was it. Elliot stepped forward. His voice, when it came, was calm, but carried like a bell through the room. "Enough." Brent turned, his brow furrowed. "Ben, this doesn't concern you." "It does now." Elliot reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open slowly, revealing an ID card with a clean photo and bold gold letters. Elliot Mendez, founder and CEO, SunnySteps Care Centers. Gasps, audible now. A child dropped their toy. The mother's mouth parted. Brent stepped back slightly as if the name alone had struck him in the chest. "I built this company," Elliot said, his tone clear and razor-sharp. "And I built it for them, for the kids, for the staff who show up day after day, not for praise, not for paychecks, because they care." He turned slightly toward Rosa. "And I watched this woman spend 5 hours straight changing diapers, calming tantrums, cleaning up messes, wiping tears, without a single break. Not one." No one moved. Elliot turned back to Brent. "But you yell at her, publicly, humiliate her, and when things go wrong, you point fingers instead of asking who's holding the weight of this entire classroom on their back." Brent opened his mouth. "Sir, with respect, I was following protocol." "No. You were following fear," Elliot interrupted. "Fear that if you don't keep pushing them harder, someone above you will notice." He took a step closer. "Well, someone just did." Silence. Then Elliot exhaled slowly. "Let's take this conversation to the back." Brent hesitated, but he knew there was no arguing now. He nodded stiffly and walked toward the hallway. Elliot turned back briefly to Rosa. "I'll handle this," he said gently. "You deserve better." Rosa didn't speak. She couldn't. Her eyes brimmed, not from shame, but from a different emotion entirely. Relief. For the first time in months, someone stood between her and the storm. As Elliot followed Brent into the office, the staff and parents stood stunned. But a quiet murmur began to move through the room. Lonnie exhaled deeply. One of the toddlers clapped randomly, unaware of what had happened, but as if to say, yes, something just shifted. Something was about to change. The door clicked shut behind them. Brent stood stiff, arms folded, trying to maintain the same dominance he'd always used to keep people in line. But it didn't land the same. Not in this room, not in front of Elliot Mendez. The office was small. A dusty file cabinet leaned in one corner. A corkboard filled with half-torn memos and outdated posters hung above a desk with coffee rings and dried glue. The chaos of the daycare was muffled behind the closed door, but the tension inside this room was thick enough to choke on. Elliot didn't sit. He didn't raise his voice either. He just looked Brent in the eyes. "I want you to explain something to me," Elliot said evenly. "How does someone like Rosa, a woman working 2 shifts back-to-back with barely time to breathe, become the one blamed when a child trips over a loose toy?" Brent shifted, clearing his throat. "It's not personal, sir. It's about liability. Parents complain. I have to respond. If I don't take action, I'm the one on the line." Elliot stepped closer. "Number C, I am the one on the line. I built this center, and I know when someone is doing damage from the inside." Brent opened his mouth, tried a new angle. "She's slow. Let's be honest, she's not young. She can't keep up with the kids like the others. I've got to maintain a standard here." Elliot's expression didn't change. "You want to talk standards? Let's talk about how you've run this location short-staffed for 6 months. Let's talk about how Rosa covered 3 classrooms by herself last week because you said nobody else was available. Let's talk about how you speak to her, like she's disposable." Brent's voice hardened now, cornered. "I'm doing what it takes to hit our ratios. If I don't push them, this place falls behind. And you get bad reviews. And I lost my job." Elliot nodded slowly as if absorbing the logic. Then he said one word. "Good." Brent blinked. "What? You're losing your job." There was no anger in Elliot's voice. No drama. Just the truth. Brent's jaw twitched. "Wait. You can't be serious. 1 accident? You're firing me over 1 accident?" Elliot's voice stayed calm, even gentle, but there was steel underneath. "Number. I'm letting you go because you created an environment where accidents were inevitable." He stepped even closer now. "You mismanaged staffing. You ignored red flags. You berated employees in front of children. You weaponized authority instead of leading with responsibility." Elliot pointed to the wall behind Brent, where the center's mission statement hung. "Every child, every caregiver, treated with dignity." "You see that?" Elliot said. "You made it mean nothing." Brent looked down, face flushing, fingers twitching at his sides. Elliot continued. "I'll make sure HR processes your separation package today. But after you walk out that door, you no longer speak on behalf of SunnySteps. Not to parents, not to staff, not to anyone." Brent was quiet now. The weight of the truth and the humiliation was settling on his shoulders. Finally, he nodded once. "I understand." "Good," Elliot said. "Then you can leave now." Brent hesitated, like he wanted to say something, maybe defend himself one last time. But he didn't. He walked out the door, and for the first time in that office, the air felt breathable again. Elliot stood still, alone for a moment, letting the silence sink in. He didn't feel victorious. He felt something deeper, responsible. Because letting someone like Brent thrive in the system was on him. On every spreadsheet, he trusted. Every glowing report ignored the people behind it. He wasn't just removing one bad manager. He was reclaiming the soul of his company. The hallway outside the office was quiet. Rosa sat on a small bench near the break room, shoulders slouched, eyes red but dry now. Lonnie stood beside her, one hand resting gently on her shoulder. A silent kind of support that doesn't need words. When Elliot stepped out, both women turned. He didn't announce anything. He didn't have to. They knew. Brent was gone. Elliot gave a small nod, and something shifted in the air, like the tension had been holding the walls up. And now they could finally breathe again. "Can we talk for a moment?" Elliot asked, his voice warm. Rosa stood quickly, almost out of habit, the instinct to obey, to brace herself. "It's okay," Elliot said gently. "This isn't about more work." They moved into one of the activity rooms, now quiet for nap time. The soft hum of a white noise machine filled the space. Foam mats lined the floor. Colorful drawings were pinned to the walls, some still crumpled at the corners, evidence of tiny hands at work. Elliot sat across from them, not behind a desk, not above them, just with them. He took a breath. "I owe both of you an apology." Rosa blinked. "You?" "I let this place run on autopilot," Elliot said. "I believed numbers, I trusted reports, and I forgot that the heart of this place is people like you, not the policies, not the ratios, not the shiny flyers." Lonnie looked down, unsure of what to say. "I watched both of you these past 2 days," Elliot continued, "and what I saw wasn't just competence. It was courage. It was endurance. It was love." Rosa's throat tightened, and she looked away quickly. No one had said words like that to her in a very long time. "I want to start making things right," Elliot said, "and I want to start with you." He turned to Lonnie. "You've stepped up in quiet ways, defending your co-workers, staying late, filling in where others failed. From this week on, I'm promoting you to assistant floor coordinator. A raise comes with it, and I want you to be part of our monthly planning team, not just doing work, but shaping how we work." Lonnie's eyes widened. "Me? But I've only been here a year." "And in that year," Elliot said, "you've done more to protect this center's soul than some people did in 5. She swallowed hard and nodded. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to," Elliot said softly. "Just keep being who you are." Then he turned to Rosa. She sat still, her hands tightly clasped. "You've carried more than your share," Elliot said, "and I can't undo the exhaustion you've already paid, but I can make sure you never have to carry that weight alone again." Rosa looked at him, eyes cautious, uncertain. "Starting next week, your shift will be adjusted. You'll be moved to our toddler transition group. Smaller ratios, shorter hours, regular breaks guaranteed. You'll also receive a pay increase, and more importantly, a contract that protects your right to refuse overtime." Rosa didn't speak. She just stared. "I also want your input," Elliot added, "on how to make this center safer, kinder, smarter. You know things from the ground level that people like me forget." Now the tears came. Rosa wiped them quickly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "You don't need to apologize for being human," Elliot said, his voice catching slightly. "That's exactly why you matter here." A silence fell, but this one was soft, full of something new. Trust. Lonnie reached for Rosa's hand. Rosa squeezed back, and Elliot knew something had changed. This wasn't just policy. This was healing. This was what leadership was supposed to look like. Later that evening, long after most of the children had been picked up and the center began to quiet down, Elliot sat alone in the staff office. A single lamp lit the desk. Folders were stacked in front of him. Personnel records, incident logs, and tucked within them, internal policy documents Brent had filed over the past year. Most of it looked standard, until one file caught his eye. A printed form labeled Voluntary Overtime Consent, Tier 2 Staff. The language was vague, but one line stood out like a bruise. "In the interest of maintaining operational continuity, I voluntarily waive any overtime pay for additional hours not exceeding 2 hours per shift as needed by management." It was signed in shaky handwriting, Rosa Delgado. Elliot leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. He flipped through more documents. 3 other forms, all signed by women over the age of 50, all caregivers, all marked as voluntary. But Elliot knew better. The fine print hid pressure. The dates aligned with peak flu season, staff shortages, and budget cuts. He rubbed his eyes, anger rising like heat in his chest. This wasn't just toxic leadership. This was quiet exploitation, wrapped in polite language and hidden in a drawer. He called Rosa. "Would you mind coming by the office for a moment?" he asked. She came in minutes later, her expression unsure. Still in her smock, her curls pulled into a loose bun, she looked exhausted, but composed. Elliot didn't waste time. He slid the paper toward her. "Did you sign this?" Rosa looked at the form, and then looked away. "Yes," she said softly. Why? Her voice was steady, but the weariness was louder than her words. Because Brent said if I didn't, I'd be moved to the Ash Grove location. That's an hour and a half away. I couldn't leave my son alone that long. I didn't want to lose the job. You were told this was voluntary. Rosa nodded slowly. He said, there's always someone willing to take your spot. Elliot clenched his fists beneath the table. This wasn't a one-off mistake. This was systemic coercion, made possible by fear, silence, and power imbalance. Rosa, he said gently, this isn't your fault. You shouldn't have been put in this position. She gave a faint smile. It's okay. I survived. That's what we do. No, Elliot said, standing. That's what you had to do. But it's not okay. The next morning, Elliot called an emergency meeting with legal, HR, and operations leads. By noon, a new directive was issued across all SunnySteps locations. All unpaid labor agreements are null and void. No employee may be asked to work beyond their contracted hours without formal compensation. Any attempt to coerce voluntary overtime through threats or implied consequences will result in immediate investigation and disciplinary action. Posters went up in every break room. Elliot personally signed each one. He didn't want it to be a memo. He wanted it to be a promise. That afternoon, he handed Rosa a copy of the new policy. She read it once, then again. Her eyes didn't water this time. They burned, with quiet, fierce pride. No more silence, she whispered. Elliot nodded. Not under my watch. And in that moment, something deeper than policy shifted. Power began to return to the hands of the people who'd kept this place alive all along. 2 days later, Elliot was sitting in his car outside the Cedar Hill Center. Rain tapped against the windshield as he stared at an email thread forwarded from HR. It wasn't meant to be alarming, just a summary of staff turnover rates across SunnySteps locations in the past 18 months. But one pattern stood out: 12 resignations, all from caregivers aged 50 or older, all from low-income neighborhoods, all marked as voluntary. Elliot frowned. He opened each exit interview file. Some mentioned family issues, others said health reasons. But buried between the polite phrases were echoes of something heavier. Wasn't getting enough hours anymore. Started getting 3-day schedules after speaking up. Felt like I was being pushed out. His chest tightened. He asked HR to pull full performance reviews, disciplinary records, and manager notes for those 12 former employees. Only 3 had ever received a formal warning, and none for anything serious. Most had glowing reviews until the final 2 to 3 months before they quit. Then came sudden negative feedback. Then came schedule cuts. Then came silence. It wasn't incompetence. It was a quiet purge, the kind that hides behind numbers and claims it's just business. That afternoon, Elliot walked into the Cedar Hill staff lounge, files in hand. Rosa was tidying up the counter. Lonnie was folding bibs by the sink. Do either of you remember someone named Teresa James? He asked gently. Rosa's head snapped up. Miss Teresa? Of course. She worked the infant room before me. She left last year? Rosa nodded. Yeah. She said she was too tired, but we knew something wasn't right. Brent cut her hours so much she could barely afford bus fare. Lonnie added quietly. He said older staff couldn't keep up with the kids, but honestly, she was one of the gentlest people we had. Elliot set the files down. This isn't isolated, he said. It's a pattern. He took a breath. I'm creating a new internal unit, employee equity and protection, focused on preventing age-based discrimination across all SunnySteps centers. Their eyes widened. He continued, his voice steady but heavy. From now on, no caregiver will be denied full hours or pushed into resignation based on age. Every location will report quarterly age-based staffing data. And every manager will be retrained, ethics, inclusion, and what dignity looks like in real life. He paused. I'm also establishing a direct reporting line to my office for any staff over 50 who feel mistreated or unheard." Rosa said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, "Most people don't care once we turn gray." Elliot looked her in the eyes. "I do, and I will." That night, he stayed late writing personal letters to each of the 12 women who'd left, inviting them back, telling them the truth. Not to fix everything, but to say, "We saw what was done, and we're not pretending anymore." And that was how the silent injustice stopped being silent. It became policy. It became a memory. But most of all, it became fuel for a better kind of future. The following Monday, Cedar Hill didn't open with the usual shuffle of half-asleep staff and the tired click of fluorescent lights. It opened with something different: presence. Elliot stood at the front entrance, not in disguise this time, but still without fanfare. No suit, no clipboard, just a worn gray pullover and a quiet determination. He was no longer here to observe. He was here to rebuild. For 2 full weeks, Elliot embedded himself into the heartbeat of the center. Not as CEO, but as someone rolling up sleeves, wiping counters, cleaning playmats, and calming toddlers after tantrums. He was there when Rosa needed a breather, when Lonnie had to call her landlord during her break. He sat with new hires as they practiced bottle feeding schedules and diaper drills. He fielded questions from young teachers nervous about what would change. But Elliot didn't bring a wave of corporate reforms overnight. He brought restoration piece by piece. First came the managerial replacement. In Brent's place, Elliot appointed May Duval, a 45-year-old former lead caregiver who once ran one of the highest-rated infant rooms in the state before being overlooked for a promotion. May didn't walk in with authority. She walked in with empathy. Within 48 hours, she had memorized every child's name. Within a week, every staff member was calling her by her first name and doing it with respect. Then came the equipment upgrade. The old bottle sanitizers, replaced. The chipped cubbies, gone. He approved a new nap mat order, toddler-safe strollers for outdoor play, and even white noise machines to help infants nap better. Next, Elliot restructured the shift schedule. He met with every staff member individually to understand their home needs. Rosa, who previously worked split shifts 6 days a week, now had 2 full days off and a consistent 9 to 4 schedule. "I can finally pick my son up from school on Thursdays," she said softly. "No more guesswork. No more hoping someone would quit just to get decent hours." Elliot also implemented a new feedback protocol, monthly roundtables, anonymous surveys, and, most importantly, a standing promise. "Any staff member can speak to me directly. No chain of command needed when it comes to dignity." And the effect? You could feel it in the room. Kids stopped crying as often during drop-off. Laughter came back into the hallways. Rosa started humming songs again while wiping down tables. Lonnie was seen helping new trainees with a confidence she never showed before. The parents noticed, too. One mother paused at pickup and said, "I don't know what changed, but my son doesn't cry when we arrive anymore. That means something." By the end of the second week, Cedar Hill no longer felt like a place barely surviving. It felt like it had come back to life. Not because of a press release, not because of a leadership memo, but because someone had walked in, seen what was wrong, and stayed to fix it. This wasn't charity. This wasn't PR. This was leadership in its rawest form. Getting your hands dirty so others can breathe easier. And Elliot knew. This was just the beginning. The third Friday came with golden sunlight spilling through the windows of Cedar Hill. It was a quiet afternoon. Most of the toddlers had drifted off into soft naps, their breathing gentle under cotton blankets. In the kitchen, Rosa was rinsing a small stack of plastic bowls, her hands moving slowly, methodically. Not from exhaustion, but from something new: stillness. Lainey leaned on the counter nearby, tying up bags of toys. She looked different now, not just in her movements, but in her eyes. Less guarded, less like she was waiting for someone to scold her, and more like someone who belonged. Elliot entered quietly, his presence so familiar by now that it didn't make anyone pause. He wasn't the boss at this moment. He was just Elliot. He motioned for the two women to sit at the small break table. Lonnie blinked. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head gently. "Number something's finally right." He pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. "I want to thank both of you," he said softly, voice full of weight. "You stayed. You carried this place when it wasn't fair to ask that of you. You did it without being seen, without being asked, and without expecting praise." They didn't say anything. Rosa looked down, twisting a napkin between her fingers. Elliot continued. "Starting next month, we're rolling out a center-wide recognition bonus system. Staff who go above and beyond, like you two, will not just hear thank yous. They'll see it on paper." He slid a printed letter across the table. Rosa read it, then read it again. Her eyes widened. "Is this real?" she whispered. "It is," Elliot nodded. "A permanent pay raise, a monthly care stipend for single parents, and most importantly, a guaranteed protected break policy, non-negotiable, written into company policy." Lonnie let out a tiny laugh, the kind that escapes before your body catches up. Sorry, I didn't expect this." "You deserve more than this," Elliot replied. "But this is where we start." And then he turned to Rosa. "We've also partnered with a local nursing training college. They're offering part-time classes and early childhood development certifications for any of our staff over 50. We'll cover the tuition." Rosa covered her mouth. Her hands trembled. "For people like me?" she asked, not quite trusting her voice. "For you, Rosa, especially for you." She didn't say thank you right away. She stood slowly, then hugged him, not because he was the CEO, but because someone had finally seen her as more than just a tired woman holding this place together. That evening, just before closing, Elliot stepped outside and stood quietly under the old cedar tree near the fence. The sun had dipped lower, and the air carried the sound of distant laughter. Behind him, the daycare still buzzed faintly, kids being picked up, dishes being stacked, chairs being lifted. But now it was different. It was alive, with trust, with fairness, with hope. Rosa came out with her bag slung over her shoulder. She stopped next to him, looked out at the street. "I used to dread walking to work," she said quietly. "Every morning felt like walking into a storm I couldn't outrun." She glanced at him. "Now, I walk in knowing someone sees me." Elliot didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "You were never invisible." The system just forgot to look. She smiled, then left, her steps a little lighter. And Elliot stood still, heart full. Not because the work was done, but because for once it was finally going the right way. As the last light faded behind the rooftops of Cedar Hill, Elliot stood in the quiet doorway of the center he had once built with so much hope, and nearly lost to distance and numbers. Now, it was different. Now he saw life again in the laughter of children, in the soft hum of lullabies sung with real care, and in the quiet, determined smiles of women like Rosa, women who had carried the weight of the world and still showed up. That's what this story was really about. A title doesn't make a leader. Walking into the fire does. If you're watching this, maybe you've been a Rosa. Maybe you've kept going when no one said thank you. Maybe you've stood in places that drained your spirit just to feed your child. Or maybe you're in Elliot's shoes, and it's time to take the hoodie, step down from the office, and go see for yourself. Because here's the truth. Systems don't fix themselves. But one brave decision can change everything for the right people. If stories like this matter to you, stories about dignity, justice, and the quiet power of good people, then hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to believe again. Turn on notifications so you never miss another story that reminds us of what leadership and humanity should really look like. Thank you for watching. And never forget, the world changes when kind people refuse to stay silent.